Good afternoon. I would like to welcome you to the second DigitalOcean cluster briefing, also on behalf of Patrick O'Keefe, who is the co-founder of the DigitalOcean cluster and who will be moderating this briefing together with me. I also welcome Nele Tiedemann, who had a key role in organizing this event. Thank you for this, Nele. And of course, hello to our speaker, Julian Clark, and the audience. I'm very happy to see that some attendees have joined us for the second time, and I'm equally happy to see new names. Some names are familiar to me in the participants list, which means that our network is growing. For those who are new, for those who are here the first time, let me say some words about the DigitalOcean cluster, abbreviated as DOC. The DOC was created in September 2020 and conducted its inaugural briefing just before Christmas. And the overall aim is to connect leading experts from academia, the private sector, government entities, and international organizations to discuss and explore topics related to the increased digitalization of the world's oceans. In the long run, the aim is to turn the DOC into a network project with in-person events such as workshops. One part of the current activities are the DOC briefings. The format is quite simple. Each briefing opens with a 15 minutes presentation or talk with an invited guest. And the following 15 minutes are dedicated to a Q&A session, to which all attendees are invited to participate. You're very much encouraged to ask questions, be it through the chat or just by raising your hand and by taking the floor. I am very happy that Julian Clark accepted to be our today's briefing guest. Julian is a global senior partner at Ince, and he has over 30 years of experience in mediation, arbitration, and litigation. Julian is an internationally recognized expert in many areas, notably in e-commerce, including blockchain, but also cybercrime and security and terrorism related to the maritime field. He's currently the chair of both the Maritime London Innovation and Technical Committee and the Cyber Risk Subcommittee of the Comité Maritime International, the CMI. But these are not the only things which connect Julian to the maritime. Previous to his career as a lawyer, he was a professional musician and for numbers of years sailed as a band leader with P&O. Julian, thanks a lot for dedicating your time to our network. It's much appreciated. And I very much look forward to your presentation on operational technology has cyber threats found a backdoor. With this, I turn over to you.
Thanks, Ada. That's really kind of you. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. And thank you to everybody that's participating in today's presentation. I will try and share my screen now to take you through this presentation. And hopefully, can I just check that everybody can see that first screen, DigitalOcean cluster, digitalization of the oceans? Can everybody see that? Yeah, great. So I'm going to speak to you for the next 15 minutes in relation to cyber risk, something that we all are obviously very passionate about, but in particular into this issue of operational technology on board vessels and whether or not this is developing a new range of risk for our industry. I think the first thing, without a doubt, that we all can agree on is that the threat is real, and indeed that threat is increasing. And this is something that I've started to refer to as the Titanic disaster scenario, because for me, what is happening here in our maritime sector is the problems and challenges of cybersecurity and cyber risk can no longer be ignored by everyone in the sector. There has been too many high-profile incidents that have occurred. But what the industry, or a lot of the industry, are still seeing and talking and contemplating are very much the tip of the iceberg, which are the identified instance. And what is of far more concern is the risk that lies beneath the waterline. And that's the combination of the unidentified instance, the failed attempts at cyber breaches, and then future risk. Some of these statistics will be well known to everybody, but it's a good way, I believe, to form an introduction and platform for what we're talking about today. Since February 2020, we've seen a 400% increase in attempted cyber attacks targeting the maritime sector. And some of that is thought to be COVID related. There's been a 900% increase on attacks on operational technology over the last 3 years. So operational technology really starting to be seen as the target for hackers. And to give a perspective of the kind of cost that we're looking at, in a study by Lloyd's of London, it was revealed that on a worst case scenario attack on 15 Asian ports, the estimated cost involved would be a loss of $110 billion. So incredibly significant figures. Now compare that kind of risk scenario against the complete inadequacy that we're seeing in relation to insurance coverage. And the underwriters, the brokers and the commentators on insurance are all saying that coverage currently is probably inadequate, not only in the terms of scope of cover, but in the financial umbrella that cover can currently provide. 92% of estimated costs arising from a cyber attack still remaining uninsured. And then again, if we look at the financial implications, over the last decade, US government have spent $130 billion in relation to cybersecurity, with an estimated $17 billion over the 2020 life cycle. Now, again, this next slide is going over just some of the things that we know. And so we know there has been an increasing development of cyber risk since perhaps 2011, if you take that as a start point, although we were seeing cyber breaches before then. And the incident that occurred with the Port of Antwerp over a period of 2 or 3 years before the cyber infiltration and the trafficking of narcotics, of arms, of contraband was discovered. Then we had the Maersk attack, or Maersk falling foul of the Non-Petier attack, to be more direct, in 2017. Costco in the US port of San Diego, 2018. These are, of course, just some of the highlights, not all of them. Norsk Hydro and the US Coast Guard in 2019. And then last year, the CMA CGM attack and the IMO being attacked. But that's what we do know about. And more concerning is what we don't know about. Scan the internet and we can all read scare stories involving AIS, GPS manipulation, taking control of navigational systems. And as Chronis Kapelidis has said, when we talk about cybersecurity, it's not a matter of if you will be attacked, but when you will be attacked. And I'm not going to go through all of these incidents now that are on this slide, because this slide will be made available to you. But the more concerning issue is what we don't know. The fact that we're simply not ahead of the game in maritime. And we've been saying this for a number of years now. When I first met Patrick, it's a discussion that we had, not least due to his background as the aviation industry. We're starting to face a perfect storm in relation to cyber risk, in that we're now picking up commentary that cyber has met sanctions, with the Treasury Office of Terrorism and Financial Intelligence making it clear that any kind of ransom payment could be stopped or could be considered a breach of international sanctions. And then as we move into a field of further and greater autonomous shipping, we have to consider the risks of cyber piracy. And then as cyber technology increases, the risk of autonomous malware and adversarial machine learning and what that will face. And why does that now create a real highlight for our industry? Why in 2021 do we particularly need to wake up and speak to our sector and ensure they're taking action? Well, the answer is, as you'll all be aware, because you can no longer not take action, because as of the 1st of January this year, it's becoming a requirement of the IMO that from the next annual audit of the vessel's document of compliance and SMS system, the safety management system will have to have a cyber regime in place, failing which, if the fleet, international shipping, will be exposed to the risk of port state control detention. And the problem is the industry ready for that? And my own research in the field suggests not. Indeed, my own feeling is that we as an industry are less ready for IMO 2021 than we were for the impacts of GDPR. And I think the reason for that is partly the Titanic disaster scenario. It's the fact that the industry still are not seeing the full scope of the threat that they're facing. And I think that the other reason for this is that commentators have said that the IMO's guidelines are already inadequate and out of date. And so you're left in a position as an owner, an operator, a trader, of what do you need to do in order to ensure that you are cyber compliant? What do you need to do to make sure that the SMS system has been updated to a standard that a port state control inspector would say, yes, that is in accordance with IMO guidelines? And so this is one of the most significant risks that we're facing. But as I started with, and as I identified as we came through these slides, and indeed, if we go back to the whole beginning of this slide, the real concern now for me is operational technology and whether or not cyber risk has found a back door. Now, if we just look at this slide, and it gives you some examples of the scope of operational technology and the cyber doorways through which a hacker can attack a vessel. Bridge control systems, navigational systems, safety systems, propulsion and power, loading and stability, all areas where the operational technology is open to cyber attack. And this is my concern. If we take a scenario, an analogy of securing a house from burglary or theft, imagine the position where we've spent a lot of money on installing security cameras, motion sensors, alarms on the doors, alarms on the windows. We've made our house really secure. We've also spotted the fact that somebody could also come around the back door. And so we've put our security sensors and our alarms and everything else on all the windows and all the doors all the way around the house. And of course, that's what we've done with our IT networks through firewalls, through air gaps, through all sorts of other procedures. We've spent a lot of time, money, and effort ensuring the cybersecurity of our IT networks. But if I go back to my house, what I didn't tell you then, because I haven't done it, is I haven't bothered putting that level of security on my garage. And so if I'm a burglar or a criminal now, I'm clever enough to know I'm not going to try and go through the front door or the back door or indeed through a window because the security is in place. I'm going to break into the garage. And once I'm in the garage, I'll break into the house that way. And this is exactly the kind of risk. And we go back to that slide where we saw the 900% increase in attacks on operational technology is what we're seeing. We're seeing hackers, whether they're hacktivists, whether they're working for geopolitical motives, whether they're criminals, whether they're people just seeing if they can take control of systems, attacking operational technology systems. And that's terrifying enough on its own, because the last thing that any of us want to happen is our bridge controls, our navigational systems, our propulsion and power, our loading and stability systems subject to a hack. But it goes further than that due to this garage house analogy. Once a hacker has broken into the operational technology, often they have bypassed the IT security and the firewalls, and through the operational technology, they can break into the infrastructure and the IT infrastructure of the company. So recently, I was involved in a case for a ship owner where this is exactly what happened. They had very up-to-date cybersecurity for their IT systems. The cyber breach came through an operational system on board one of the vessels. The hackers, having gone through that operational technology gateway, found their way into the central data records of the head office, which was in Europe. By getting into the data systems of the head office in Europe, they were able to access all the confidential information of personnel, customers, and information that would be subject to the company facing a GDPR fine of 4% global annual turnover. And what the criminal hacker then did was send a series of ransom demands to the company, saying that unless the ransom was met within 72 hours, then all this information, all this confidential information will be published on the internet. Not only causing huge embarrassment and business disruption to the company, but exposing them to a GDPR penalty. And thankfully, in that case, we were able to act and we were able to block the hack and block access to the information. But this is the risk that we have been facing. So that is a very quick introduction in relation to the risk scenario that we're talking about. I don't want to take up any more time presenting because I think we benefit greater in these sessions from our Q&A and our discussion. I will say that I can't say too much in detail now, but as of the 1st of next month, I will be launching what I believe is the world's first positive and full cover response to this issue by bringing to the maritime sector a combination of legal services, consultancy services, and tech. I think we've come up with and partnered with a company that can provide the technical protection on board vessels offshore in order to protect their operational technology. But more of that post 1st February when we get to launch. So without more ado, thank you very much for listening to that opening presentation. I hope that it's set the scene, and I will hand back to Patrick to start the Q&A. Thank you.
Julian, thank you very much for this introduction. And to be honest, I'm now quite excited about what you have just mentioned, because it also leads over to my question I have prepared before we go over to the audience. Is basically a perfect example. So working the field you have mentioned before, so there are quite a variety of different interpretations and the terminologies and so on. And you mentioned the information technology, IT, you mentioned also operation technology, and it also has different meanings for different players. So this must be very difficult. And also looking ahead from what you have just mentioned, what you're going to do in the next month, is quite difficult to grapple with when trying to address challenges in this field. So how are all the different actors you're working with, how do you bring them together, and how does this influence your daily work? This is something I would like to ask you.
Thanks, Patrick. It's a combination of both providing a workable, practical solution, but also there's an educational piece here. Because when we started doing our research about the validity of the project, we were speaking to owners and operators who were saying, oh, you know, we're fine. You know, we have systems in place. We have sufficient firewalls. We have Cisco systems. We have air gaps. But we were able to demonstrate to them that those existing systems were not protecting the operational technology on board the vessels. We were also able to demonstrate with the company that I'm working with, have ethical hackers that work with the company. And we demonstrated that within 20 minutes, in fact, on a live demonstration, within 20 minutes, we took control of the whole operations on board the vessel, navigational, engine room, loading and stowage, and within 40 minutes had broken into the head office systems. So there's an educational piece about what the problem is. I think the other educational piece is in relation to, you know, again, it's one of those problems that our industry often faces in relation to where is the international governance for what we do. So we have the IMO, and the IMO is fantastic, but it takes the IMO a long time to react to things. So at the moment, there are a whole host, a little like happened after the Gulf of Aden piracy incidents in 2008, of law firms, surveying firms, technical firms, IT firms, all say that they've got a solution and they understand shipping. Some of them do. Some of them are very good. Some of them are hopeless. I mean, literally hopeless. The same thing happened with Gulf of Aden. Now, the problem for an owner is who do you know? You know, there's no kite mark. There's no internationally recognized seal of approval. And you might say, well, I'll go to my class society because my class society surely is recognized. But then can your class society bring in the consultancy skills that you need or the legal skills that you need? So what we've tried to do is address that point, and also address the point by developing technology that actually works on board a vessel. I mean, you take a Cisco firewall system, which works fantastically in your office, but stick it in an engine room on board a vessel and go look at it in 6 months' time and see if it's still working. And of course, the other problem with traditional firewall systems is in 12 months, they become obsolete. They have to be updated. And the way you update them is you have to strip them out and deploy completely new kit. And so the other solution I think that operators need to look for is solutions that can be updated remotely so that they can ensure constant protection of the OT systems without having to go through either the disruption of reinstalling the technical solution or the cost of actually reinstalling the technical solution. So shipping doesn't get easier, does it? For those involved in our industry, the more every day that goes, it appears, I'm sure lots of us on this call would agree with this, that the barriers to trade increase. Legal complexities, the regulatory burdens, compliance burdens, issues with trade, issues with sanctions. It's just becoming so difficult to actually do what ships are there to do and operate for.
All right, thank you very much. Using the remaining time, also switching over to question number 1. Helge, could you please introduce yourself very briefly and post your questions or ask your question?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking my question. My name is Hagop Abujian. I am regulatory as well as a cybersecurity consultant. I have a background in investigations, compliance-related investigations, as well as M&A related compliance investigations. And my question is, how much, as we all know, cybersecurity has several components, has a technical aspect to it as well as the human aspect. My angle about the cybersecurity issue or the risk of cybersecurity is the emphasis more on the human aspect of it in this regard, whether it's the crew of a ship, whether or not there's a plan of how to mitigate a cyber attack. And my question was, how much of a perceived, because there's a perception out there that shipping and the maritime business is a bit of a checkered, has a reputational issues due to, depending on what flag a ship is carrying for tax reasons or other regulatory reasons. So how much of that is contributing to the vulnerability of this industry to cyber attack?
I hope that's a fantastic question. And there's a lot to unpack there. There's a lot in that question. I agree with you with what you say. I think the human issue is huge. It's one of the problems that we face with shipping is not only are there so many data entry points on board a ship, but also there are so many people that have access to the ship. Stevedores, crew members, passengers that will all bring on board often their own tech on board, so their own laptops. And we know that despite procedures in some very significant companies, we've seen instances of officers on the watch recharging mobile phones and plugging in their mobile phones into the ECDIS system on the vessel. Engineering staff using their own laptops to download updates because they need to find out quickly what the latest technical manual might say. And where did they go for that? They go on the internet, and they can end up infiltrating and infecting the vessel as a result of that. Again, I think that's a huge reputational piece, huge educational piece in relation to what we need to do to raise awareness, train our crews, and find a way in which to take steps to protect against the human element of shipping, which of course is so prevalent in every aspect of damage and accident and casualty in our industry. And I also agree with you from a reputational point of view. I mean, shipping is falsely accused, isn't it? It's the frustration that we all see at the moment, where 400,000 seafarers trapped on board vessels, and you never see a single piece of information on the news, really, in the national media. If you speak to somebody who's not involved in our industry, you stop them in the supermarket, they have no knowledge of or really concern about the plight of our seafarers. And yet one pollution incident and suddenly shipping's to blame, shipping don't have safety controls, shipping are the demons of breach of environmental regulation. So again, I think there is a huge piece there about educating the world about not only the importance of shipping, but just how safe an international operation it is, and the steps that the industry are taking.
Thank you very much for both the question and the reply, actually. I would like to hand over to question number 2 by Christian. Christian, could you please introduce you very briefly and pose your question? Thank you.
Yes, of course. Can you hear me?
Yes, Christian.
Okay, so thank you for the organizers and Julian for your great presentation. My name is Christian, and I'm an assistant professor at the University of Southern Denmark Department of Law. And I did my PhD on the use of private armed guards. So my interest is, of course, very much on sources of law and regulation. And as I posed in my question, in terms of the IMO's DOC and SMS new requirement here, what is your perspective on how to approach this and how to mend the gaps? So basically trying to have an international uniform model, but also what sources of instruments do you take into consideration when you will see the best fit, so to speak? Would that be like standardization, which I referred to, or would it be doable with a new, so to speak, convention on cybercrime? Thank you so much.
Thanks, Christian. You could have been present last week at a meeting of the CMI subcommittee on cybercrime, because what you've just said is exactly what the topic of discussion was there. We within that group that are made up of lawyers and other industry specialists from across the world that have an interest in cyber risk, we were all giving examples from our own jurisdictions and in international convention where some very, very common international conventions may not address a standard claim where the root cause of that claim is cyber related. So, for example, looking at the position of a general average claim and cargo interests, as they always do, saying, well, we're not contributing to general average because we're saying the vessel's unseaworthy. And then you get into the whole exercise of unseaworthiness due diligence. And we know how that operates if it's part of an engine, or it's a hatch cover, or it's the stowage or loading equipment, or even the navigational equipment. And the Muncaster-Castle test, the due diligence only operates once the vessel is in the control and ambit of the owner. So if it's you can show that it's a latent defect that goes to the construction phase, that the legal responsibility doesn't lie on the owner. But what happens if the casualty, the general average incident, has been as the result of some kind of cyber issue? Already you're asking the question, was it a cyber defect? Was it a latent cyber defect? Was it something in the programming? Was it as a result of a cyber attack? And the existing conventions obviously don't deal with that. A similar issue, just to give one other example, limitation of liability under the 1976 convention deals with reckless conduct or intentional conduct in order for a claimant to break a ship owner's right to limit liability. But what happens in circumstances where the casualty has come as a result of a cyber attack? So let's say an operational attack on cyber, which takes over the navigational systems of the vessel, and the owner says, well, look, what can I do about that? You know, I was hacked, I was taken over. But a claim is brought that because the owner hadn't taken sufficient steps to ensure the integrity of the operational technology on the vessel, that they've been reckless. They've effectively sent the vessel to sea in an unseaworthy condition. Current condition doesn't look at that at all. So the result of that meeting last week was that the committee agreed and has written to the chair of the CMI, recommending that we prepare a questionnaire process to go out to the international community, raising these questions, asking what's the instance of these breaches, what's the thought of the conventions, and then hopefully later this year, vaccine willing, the CMI convention in Tokyo will take place, and we're hoping we'll run a symposium as part of Tokyo, where we'll discuss topics, look at the results of a questionnaire, and then look to go two ways. Either look to supplement current international convention, or, and I suspect this might be a better way to go, as Sir Bernardina recommended in relation to autonomous shipping, create a specific convention article for cyber risk. That's the answer, I think, to your question. Of course, the immediate problem with that is how long is that going to take? So even if that went all to plan, we are years away from amending an existing convention or creating a new convention. But currently, under our framework, there's not a lot else we can do.
Thank you very much. Slowly coming to an end, I still would like to take question number 3. Fenella, could you briefly introduce yourself and also ask your question? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to the organisers and also to Julian for your presentation. I'm actually a colleague of Christian, so I work at Southern University, Denmark as well. And my question is about the involvement of the public sector, for example, law enforcement, in the prevention of cyber risks. Obviously, they have a major role after an attack in the investigation, but what kind of role do they have in prevention or compliance or management of cyber risks?
That's another excellent question, Fenella. In relation to, say, I took the UK and looked at the UK or England and Wales's police force, task force on cybercrime, very little in relation to marine. So, as you say, they're very reactive. They're not proactive, and they're certainly not, as far as I'm aware, developing loss prevention initiatives. We see more activity from the US in relation to talking to those involved in homeland security and those involved in cyber security of maritime assets in the US, who have been more actively engaged in engaging with symposiums such as this. Brian Wilson, who Patrick introduced me to, has spoken a number of times in relation to cyber risk. He used his expertise. But I think, again, we need greater synergy in relation to working with law enforcement.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much to everyone. Actually, to keeping our promise to have a short and snappy briefing of 30 minutes, we are going to close the session in a moment, and I would like to hand over to Anna for the closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Julian, for the presentation. Thank you very much for the attendees to participate, and I hope you enjoyed the briefing, the format, and we will host a next briefing in February, and you will certainly hear from us in due course. And of course, we are also happy to hear from you if you have any suggestions for speakers or regarding the format. And we will also soon launch an updated version of our website where we will notably upload the recordings of the DOC briefings And we would also like to start thinking about how we could expand our activities of the network, especially in these times of restricted or impossible travels. A concrete idea is to soon organize a DOC coffee break in order to get to know each other over a cup of coffee and to learn how each of us is involved in with the increased digitalization of the oceans, and just to get to know each other despite the impossibility to meet in person. In short, there is more to come, and we are happy to receive suggestions and feedback. And yes, on this note, I would like to close the event. Have a very good week, and most importantly, stay healthy. Goodbye, and thank you very much.